Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Personality Yoda. This is I think it's our 11th interview. So we're on the homeward stretch. And today I want to introduce you to a very, very dear friend of mine, a gentleman called JD Martin, which as a Brit, you kind of go, is that really your name? But he'll tell us more about that in a moment. And JD is representing the nurturer, connector, guardian world. For those of you really getting the hang of these five voices, and that is an ESFJ for those of you who speak MBTI speak. So, JD, welcome from your sauna. I love the background. Good of you. You look like you've lost a lot of weight since I saw you last as well. So the sauna is obviously working. But welcome, JD. Honoured to have you on Personality Yoda as my guest today. Why don't you, JD, introduce yourself, tell everyone a little bit about you, a bit about your background, help us get to know who this amazing character is, where you grew up, sort of jobs you've done, experiences you've had, and I'll help things chivvy along as we go. So come on, JD, tell everyone a bit about you, who you are.
Thank you, Steve. Pleasure to be here with you this morning, man. It's always good. I enjoy every time I get to have a conversation with you, and I miss our meetings in Oklahoma.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's man, to stand here and tell you what it's like to be an ESFJ. It's a long story, and I'll try to keep it brief. So I think there's a couple of important pieces though that I have to mention, because as I've learned from you guys, there's so many things that influence us in our life.
Yeah.
Now, what I can say is that I can think back as being a kid. I remember still being really caring.
Yeah.
At the age of 11, my dad was killed in a car accident.
Wow.
And at that point, I think there was a kind of a mental shift for me, in that I wanted to try to do everything I could to help take pressure off of my mom.
Yeah.
And that's probably part of being the nurturer that I am. Was I saw mom, struggling. So I thought, what can I do to help? So anything I could do to make money, either for myself or for the family, that's what I did. So at the age of 11, I went to thinking I was the head of the household.
Yeah.
And I had no one to really tell me otherwise. Wow. So I just worked real hard. And I
where were you growing up, JD? Where was home? Brothers, sisters, anyone else in this family that you now feel responsible for at the age of 11?
Yes, and I should have mentioned that.
That's right.
I was growing up in a small town, and you can look it up on the map. It does exist, called Smackover. Smackover, Smackover, Arkansas.
Okay.
We had one stoplight.
Wow.
So at this point in time, it's my mom, myself, and a brother that was 3 years younger than me.
Okay.
So that was our family.
Yeah.
I now have, while I'm on this, another brother and a sister. So I'm the oldest, obviously. Okay. But that was a major shift for me as a kid, was thinking, man, I got to work hard. And I really didn't allow myself to have much fun as a kid, even through high school. Yeah. So moving on, I get to this place where, I'm focused on work. Before I get too far, I want to say I now have this amazing wife, Amanda.
Yep.
I have 3 kids of my own. David, my oldest, is he'll be 21 in September. I know I don't look that old, but
incredible.
It's possible. And I've got 2 daughters, 10 and 12, that man, just just love me dearly. And quick piece about of Giant is, I love that I now intentionally am more intentional with being present with them.
Yeah.
Because they still love to meet me at the door and all that stuff. So
that's awesome.
They're active in a lot of things. Get me back on track, Steve.
No, this is amazing. So Arkansas, for those of you around the world, when Americans always describe their town by the number of stoplights they have. And the smaller the number, the smaller the town. So one stoplight is one set of traffic lights. So you think of Main View, this is proper out in the middle of nowhere, in kind of everyone knew everyone, JD, I imagine, at that stage in your life. So
it's funny. I think if you Google Smackover, Arkansas, it actually the one stoplight on a pole in the middle of the road is like the heading, the picture on the front.
Wow. Well,
Kind of
and so you started work very early, felt very responsible for everyone. Almost, you can see how that nature nurture choice plays. That when you have by nature the carer and the looking after everyone, which is why, and then all of a sudden the nurture, the physical environment of your world puts you in a place where that now becomes your life. You move into overdrive with your choice. So everything then is about other people and serving other people, particularly your mum and the family, at a very early stage of life for someone like you. So, beyond high school, what happened then?
So right out of high school, I go to work.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of high school. But what I got in my 11th grade year, I got the opportunity to go to the college in the afternoon. I'd go to high school in the morning, college in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And Steve, in my senior year, I realized, I looked back and I made A's in every college course that I took. Didn't matter what it was. And I made C's and B's, primarily C's probably, in high school. Yeah. And I asked myself this question. I said, why am I doing so much better in these difficult classes, but I'm not in high school? And my response to myself was this: I enjoyed being at college. I didn't enjoy being in high school. So I said, hey, maybe I can change this with my attitude. So I challenged myself my senior year to just go do what it takes and just be there. Yeah. Do my homework. And, it's a real novel idea. Do your homework and enjoy being there. And for the first time since elementary school, I made straight A's that first semester. And, so I proved to myself that attitude was everything.
Yeah. Okay.
And how I look at something. So I go to work and I realize, man, this work's not all it was cracked up to be. I better go to school while I can.
Yeah, absolutely. What work were you doing?
I went straight to work for a construction company, and we have a lot of plants, chemical plants, forestry is a big industry here. Yeah. And it wasn't clean, it wasn't great. And I thought, man, if I'm going to do anything different and better myself, I better go back to school. Yeah. So found some work, went back to school, and ended up at the age of 20 getting on with the local natural gas company here in Arkansas. Yeah. Which I ended up spending 18 years with. And later on in this conversation will be how I actually wound up meeting you guys.
So 18 years, I mean, help me, working for natural gas. What are you doing? Sort of digging gas out of the ground? What does working for natural gas mean?
All right. So when I started, yes, I was on a crew. I was actually a welder, and another skill I picked up when I was like 15.
Wow.
So we basically would, put in new lines, fix old lines, fix leaking lines, and run gas to people's houses. I did that for 5 years before I moved into environmental and actually moved away from home. I moved up to Little Rock and got into environmental and spent, several years in environmental health and safety before I moved to Houston and got into the corporate office.
Houston was slightly bigger than SmackDown then.
Little Rock, I think the population of Little Rock is about 180,000, 200,000 maybe now. So it was a good transition before I went to the big city of Houston. I probably would have died down there. I would have went first.
Little Rock obviously is famous. I've been to Little Rock because I went to the presidential library very close to where you guys are. So, I know where you are at this point. So that's awesome. So that makes total sense to me, JD. So you said you got married along the way. Did you find the Mrs. Martin somewhere in the gas industry, or where did she come along?
She was my dental hygienist.
I love these stories. Okay, I've got to hear how you pulled that one off because I hate them. But go on, keep going. So how did that work? You met over her in your side of your mouth with a kind of drill thing or whatever.
So one of my jobs I had while I was in high school, I worked for a man who owned a farm, and the man who owned the farm was a dentist. So obviously, if I needed to go to the dentist, I went to him.
Yep.
The late Dr. Looney. And when I was at the gas company, Amanda was his hygienist. And I just remember she was always super nice, enjoyed having conversations with her. But I was, I'm friendly with everybody. I'm an ESFJ.
Of course. Nurture, connector, loving the world, gathering the world. Come on.
So when she found out that I had moved to Little Rock, Steve, she actually called me to try to fix me up with a friend of hers, and it didn't work. It backfired on her.
I love stories like this. So kids came along, you've had your kids, you're 38 years or whatever it was at the end of the gas industry. Is this the transition into Giant, or is there another chapter after the gas company?
So nope. Whenever I left the gas company, that was the end of 2018.
Okay.
I moved to South Florida to be next to our one and only Mike Opadahl.
Oh, so right. Okay, this is getting the itch of it now. So okay, so we're in Little Rock. Well, we're in Houston now. Corporate gas. So I always say to people is, how on the earth did you ever find Giant? And then we'll move into a little bit about going how perhaps you understanding your voice order began to shape some of the ways that you look to the world. So go on, give us a little bit. How on the earth did you meet Giant?
All right. Well, let me tell you a little bit of the backstory here. For, probably 15 years, and I know some of my coworkers might actually watch this one day. Probably 15 years of my 18-year career there.
Yeah.
I never had a day of work I didn't want to get up and go to work. Wow. I always took great pride in my work.
Yeah.
And my work, I felt like represented part of who I was.
Yeah.
Which was something that I learned later. I'd take my work very personal. So if anybody critiqued it, it hurt. Yeah. I'd get real defensive. But we had merged two companies together through a joint venture, and the culture of our organization was it was becoming really difficult. Yeah. And it felt political. Yeah. And as an ESFJ, I almost feel the environment around me. And it was a struggle. So for the first time in my life, getting up and going to work was like, it was a struggle. And it was a grind. I actually stood up in a meeting in Houston with all of our leaders and everyone there one day and told everyone, like, I hope you find somebody who can lead us well, because right now it's just a job. And that's annoying.
Yeah.
So here comes Giant. They recognized that, we needed some help. They bring Giant in to start helping create this new culture that we needed.
Yeah.
And I didn't want any part of it, Steve. I had committed myself to growing. Yeah. I had been through so many of their programs, their leadership programs and all that.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like it did anything for me. No one cared. I worked real hard. No one saw it. And that was another thing about an ESFJ. If we feel like we're not appreciated, we're going to check out on you at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So finally, my boss came along and he said, "Hey, you're going into this leadership program. You need to get your flights together." And I said, "I don't want to." Those guys, I was so burnt out. I didn't even know how bad it was.
Yeah.
I said, "I don't want to." And he said, "You have to. You don't have any choice. So you're going to do it." And so obviously I did it. And I showed up at Oklahoma City. And the very first day, our one and only Jeremy Kubicek was leading that day. And I sat there and it I don't know if it even took an hour, but I was flipping through the toolkit. Yeah. I was listening to Jeremy talk, and I thought, man, this is actually pretty good. And I started asking myself the difficult questions. What's your problem? What's wrong with you? Why are you behaving like this? And but before the day was over, Steve, every chance I'd get, I was pulling on Jeremy, like, "Hey, this is really good. Can I do this? Like, what do I need to do to be able to do what you guys do?"
Wow.
And I'll never forget. He said, I remember what I'll never forget it. He's like, "Well, we really don't like to hire our clients' employees. It's not really good."
Yeah.
I said, "No, I get all that." I said, "I'll take care of that end." And he said, "Well, we need to talk outside of here." So we talked later. He put me in touch with Mike, of which I'll never forget that conversation either. Yeah. And then Mike and Hunter got so busy, I didn't hear from them. And I thought, golly, JD, you said too much. You talked too much. You scared them.
But obviously not.
Obviously not. They called me back. They let me go through training, which we were still doing in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so I came out, I did all that with you guys.
Yeah.
And still, I went to leadership at what's now Enable and said, hey guys, this is something that I'm doing. They didn't hunt me down. They didn't pursue me. I'm pursuing them.
Yeah.
And you guys let me in the door. I've been with you ever since.
Amazing. That almost feels very rash and spontaneous, JD, in terms of this gut feel of I know what's there. So remember, these are the Voices interviews. So I know that you came through when ESFJ was the Myers-Briggs language we used, but if you think nurturer, connector, guardian, they are interchangeable. So we use Voices because it's just easier for everyone to remember. The shorthand, if we're doing coaching at the highest level, we'll often use the other bit, but we've put everything in the Voices. So tell us a little bit about for you. So you said, even listening, things like when your dad died at 11, you ended up taking on caring for everyone and being responsible for everybody. Where were some of the ahas for you when you suddenly realized, oh my goodness, I'm a nurturer connector, and these are beginning to join up the dots, when I suddenly realized, no wonder I behave or the situation. Give us some of the kind of Voices insights for you of where that self-awareness really began to be, oh my goodness, that just makes sense. Give us a couple.
A big one. And guys, you guys listening will maybe be able to relate to this. Back up to when my attitude changed at work and I lost that drive, and I no longer felt like it had become just a job.
Yeah.
Part of that joint venture, we flattened the organization. So we did away with all the managers and middle managers. So at that point, all of the team that I was leading now reported to my boss. So my teammates and I are now colleagues, and we report to my boss, and I have no direct reports anymore. So those guys were actually sitting out on this open floor, almost like a trade floor type setting with cubes, low walls.
Yeah.
And I had an office. Now I did this on my own. I said, man, if we're working together and now you guys all work with me, not for me, I'm just going to come out here and sit with you guys. So I never went back into my office. But here's the thing. And this was a lie that I believed, Steve.
Yeah.
I lost the drive, or I thought I lost the responsibility for challenging them to get them to keep growing. Now, the reality is, even as a friend, you can challenge people to continue growing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an org chart.
Yes.
That gives you permission to move people forward.
Yeah.
And I told them when they told me that the organization was changing and my title was changing and all that, I said, well, I'm not defined by my title. So it's okay. I'll be okay. But my actions actually said that I was.
Yeah.
Because I stopped challenging the team. And for me, I lost a big sense of my purpose because now I don't have anybody to care for.
Interesting. Yeah.
That was a big one.
Massive. So let's move on a stage. Thank you, JD. Thanks for sharing so honestly. I mean, I always learn things when people share with me. I'm always fascinated by people's life story and also how they came into our world and how they continue to do that. But so maybe if I put up the support challenge matrix, because JD, what a lot of people often really enjoy is going, while we've got a nurturer, connector, creative, or ESFJ on the show, you are almost like a live example that gives us a way in to what does the world look like when you look at it through your eyes. And we talk about this kind of sense of going, the culture that everybody is wanting to live in is a liberating culture where we're learning how to calibrate high support and high challenge. And I always say in this bit, if I was your boss, JD, if I was your line manager, horrifying though I'm sure that might be, and I was to come to you and say, JD, I know you're a nurturer, connector, guardian. I know we've done these things, but I want to hear from you. I'm not a personality Jedi. I don't, carry a lightsaber. Help me understand, JD, what the type of things I would have to do. What are some of the behaviors? What are some of the practices that actually would be for you the most effective form of high challenge and high support? So, you give us some of the clues from you. I'll hopefully add a little bit of color over the top of it as well. But everybody, there are a lot of nurturer, connectors, guardians out there. There's an awful lot of nurturers, that's for sure, 43% of people. So this is real invaluable data. So just come on, tell us, what does high support and high challenge look like for you, JD, and be as practical as you can?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would tell my boss that I would probably share this tool with them and say, my default
Yeah.
is always going to be on this left side.
Yeah.
Where I'm not naturally challenging.
Yeah.
It's something that I've had to learn and grow in. And typically I'm going to be on this protect side where I'm low challenge, but I'm high support.
Yeah.
I'm always for people.
Yeah.
I would tell them my filter is always going to be people first.
Yeah.
And then I'll figure out everything else later on. So what does support look like for me?
Yeah.
Steve, I think a lot of it is one, and as I say this now, I've grown a lot, but let's get down to the reality. Most people haven't been through all of the training and stuff like we have.
Yep.
Man, I need encouragement.
Yeah.
As a nurturer,
yeah,
I need to be encouraged regularly.
Yeah.
And often.
Yeah.
And also a big piece is appreciation.
Yeah.
I think if nurturers feel appreciated, they will continue to serve you at the highest capacity.
Yeah.
But at the moment that I begin to feel like I'm taken for granted,
yeah,
or that I'm being taken advantage of,
yeah,
I'm going to begin to withdraw, and I'm going to begin to get real quiet. And that would be another flag I would share with them. If I get quiet, my connector, when we did the 5 voices manually, I had myself as a connector.
Yes.
But I've tested ESFJ from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And even as, in our stories, with all the moving and the changing, I thought, well, maybe, I'm probably more like a pioneer now. No, it never changed. It's always ESFJ.
Yeah, that's good. That's so helpful. I mean, go on, keep going. You got more for me. More.
So take care of me, appreciate me, recognize that I'm giving it everything I've got.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to tie this challenge piece in with where I was at the end of my gas career.
Yeah.
Steve, I had been in 16, 17 years.
Mm.
I had, I think, 9 positions. So even as an ESFJ, I really like to change things a lot in that regard. So I worked a lot of jobs in that time frame.
Mm.
And my average was probably 2 years.
Yeah.
So I was always thinking, what's my next step?
Yeah.
I know some people are going, you millennials. I was born in 80, so I'm on the borderline. But I was always considering what my next step was. In this role, I got there in 2013. So now here we are, 2017 and 18, when I'm really struggling. It's the longest one title job I'd had. Mm. And what I realize now is that I was in the pit of despair. Here's the challenge that I needed, Steve.
Yeah.
Although I can vision and I can think about the future, it's not normal for me. It's not normal for an ESFJ.
Yeah.
We're so caught up in what's going on around us. We have to really intentionally set time aside to think about, okay, I want to vision the future and think about what I want the future to look like.
Yeah.
That's work for me. So if I would have had a leader that would have said, hey, look, here's the deal. I recognize all the things that you do well. I recognize your talent. I recognize that you'll learn things that I need you to learn, but I need you to see the future down the road. I need you to see what opportunities we have down the road. And I needed them to challenge me to go, I need you to step up right now and take care of everything that we've got. But I want you to know we're moving towards something else. Yeah. That would have got me out of the pit of despair. It took me a year, Steve, to realize that I was in the pit of despair.
Yeah. That's so good, JD. There's so much gold in there. And I think what's interesting is for those of you who've watched some of the other sort of interviews, that the foundational voice shapes how people are experienced, but there's a difference between the nurturer guardian and the nurturer connector and the nurturer creative. And it's really interesting that today, obviously, we're engaging with the nurturer connector guardian and actually listening how distinct and different those are. So here's what I heard you say, JD. Let's see if I'm a good boss. So what you're really saying is, Steve, if I'm really gonna be a good leader for you, I have to treat you like a human being first rather than a human doing. So in a sense, you are wired for relationship. And in the end, if you know that I'm committed to you as a person and to prepare to get to know you as a person and to do real relationship with you, then basically you become one of the most loyal, hardworking, committed people I could ever have. But actually at the point where you feel I'm just treating you like a unit of production who's a cog in my machine or a pawn on my chessboard, then all of a sudden that becomes very difficult because it feels transactional, whereas actually your default is for relational and care. That'd be good first time?
That would be great. And let me make one point.
Yeah.
Talking about that level of commitment and my willingness to work hard.
Yes.
As a nurturer,
yeah.
Remember now, I used to call recharge laziness.
Yes. Yeah.
I will work to my own detriment.
Yes.
So if I'm working for someone who appreciates me, yeah, I'm so committed that I'll actually begin to neglect myself at some point.
That was one of the ones I've got on my list, is to go that actually when you're dealing with nurturer connected guardians, it's easy to abuse their commitment because their desire to please authority figures in their life is very, very high. So therefore, in a sense, I have to, if I'm your boss or if I'm leading you, I have to be careful that I don't just assume, well, eventually JD will tell me when I've asked to do much of it. Because usually what will happen is the nurturer connected guardian, the desire to please someone who they know is for them, means you would rather die of exhaustion and burnout and mental health exhaustion than ever tell me, Steve, I'm not sure I can do all the things you're asking me to do. So my duty of care as a boss is to actually make sure that what I'm asking you to do is an appropriate ability to use the time you have so that you actually have time for other things. So for me, again, knowing the people-pleasing tendencies of the nurturer connector, in the end, the encouragement that's daily, the appreciation of who you are that is specific, not just a generic, JD, you're awesome, to actually show you that I've taken the time to see the extra that you've done and the detail and the care. So if I can name the things you've done of what I'm really wanting to celebrate and appreciative of, it shows that I'm more than going through the motions with you. And another one for me would be is to go, people often miss is with you, I would let you check in often. So in a sense of going, the desire to make sure you're doing things right, certain personalities would just go, hey, just tell me what to do and come back in 3 months' time. Whereas with someone like you, actually really requires and would welcome quite regular interaction, not just about the task. I could pick up the phone and call you while I'm driving or you're on a trip, whatever it is. There would never be a bad moment for me to pick up the phone and talk to my nurturer connector and go, hey, how's it going, JD? How's it going? What's happening? Particularly if I'm also able to remember some of the things about you as a human being and David, your son, or whatever those things are. So that's another nuance. If you're going to lead a nurturer connector guardian well, is it's actually connecting often and making sure that you feel confident that what you're doing is exactly the right thing. Usually feels very supportive. Would that be fair, JD?
It absolutely is. And one thing you said was, that regular check-in. Although I think I want to be assigned a task and left alone, the reality is I don't like goalposts moving.
No.
I don't like shifting goals and things changing all the time that I feel like I'm working toward, because I don't like doing pointless work. So it's so key that I know for sure that what I'm doing is moving us in the direction that we're supposed to be going, because coming to me later and going, you did this incorrectly, man, that's really a blow to us nurturers.
I put as well here that I have to guard your over responsibility for people's well-being and care. So because of the way you're wired, you feel people's pain in a way that for an insensitive pioneer connector like me is almost like exhausting. I can't imagine how tiring it must be to even be walking past people and just to know something's wrong with them, because you pick up that emotional, relational disturbance of pain. And of course, you can care as well. So my care for you as an employee is always to go, JD, how many people are you carrying right now? How heavy is the load? And how many people do you need to actually let leave your care right now, because you can't care for everyone at the same time? So over responsibility and over care and almost feeling responsible for everyone's well-being and purpose in life can often wear you out if you're not careful. That you've ever known that?
I have. Thankfully, I met you guys, and you guys taught me how to say no. So, nurture. You have to learn to say no.
There you go. I'm channeling my inner Amy Norton at the moment when I always say to nurturers, I go, she's the nurturer guardian for those of you who've seen it on the platform. And I always have to ask my nurturers, I go, are you good at what you do? And when they can look me in the eye down the tube and go, Steve, I'm world class at what I do. You're actually lucky to have me working with you, because you won't find anyone more competent than me. Then I know that we've got a level of confidence in the nurturer, which is very, very rare, because every nurturer I know deals with that imposter syndrome. And always, because they're so sensitive to the needs of other people, the thought that they would push themselves forward for promotion over and above their peers almost is incredibly difficult to do. So the other thing I would commit as a liberating leader for you, JD, is to take the time to understand, what do you really want your future to look like, even if it feels difficult to vision too far ahead. And what I would do is I would actually sponsor your career, in the sense I would go, JD, I know you're never going to apply for the job unless I do it for you. Because in the end, for you to say you think you're better than your peers is just almost excruciating. But I think you are. And will you trust me that when the time's right, I'm going to help you apply to the next thing and the next thing. And I'm going to stop you ever just becoming safe. Because in the end, what you'll find with every nurturer, and the nurturer connector is right in there, once you find an environment where you feel competent and everyone trusts your competency and everyone loves you in the role you're in, the more time you spend in that role, the harder it is for you to ever leave it, because you feel responsible. You don't feel actually fearing that you're going to let anyone down. It's really easy, if you're not careful, to become comfortable in a role with people and a work that actually is too easy for you over long term.
I used to put it this way. I never want to become the subject matter expert, because I always saw that those guys got locked in.
Yeah.
And now, one thing you just said, Steve, was like, man, I would sponsor you. Yeah. Steve, we've talked about, and I know we've asked the question sometimes, who have you let influence you? And what's that feeling you have for those people? Listen, I've got a few people within that industry that if they needed something today, I would drop everything I was doing and I'd go help them. And they did exactly, you pinpointed it, Steve. They did exactly what you said. They encouraged me. Yeah. They believed in me, and they made phone calls for me. Yeah. And they said, hey, I know this kid. He's a hard worker. He does his job really well. He'd make a great fit for what he's wanting to get into that happens to be underneath you, part of your team.
Yeah, that's so good. There's so much gold there for, you will meet these characters. And the last one I'd say, JD, is people often assume, because the nurturer, connector, guardian is very, very good with details in the present for people, and they have almost unlimited capacity for details with people. They are not, as always, though they can do the guardian detail, they do get worn out of doing guardian detail if it doesn't involve people, if they're not actually connected to people. So when I watch them, I always be careful that they don't get isolated on their own doing guardian detailed task on their own for an extended period of time, because it really does drain the battery. You can do it, but often they become slightly resentful of me. So I'll always be monitoring, hey, how much time are you spending doing non-life-giving guardian work, JD? Just because you can doesn't mean actually it's something I want you to do all the time.
If you could only know the job that I had in the end of my career there, it was this is what we call scheduling, and capacities. So literally, it was spreadsheets. It was spreadsheets and numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Every single day, and you had to do it 5 times a day. You had to look at these numbers 5 times a day. Yeah. And I had that job for 5 years, Steve.
Oh my good Lord.
And half of that, they took my team away, and I didn't have anybody to care for. So I was losing my mind. My 70-30 was almost like 0.
There you go.
I would walk out of the building, and guys, I wasn't working physically hard.
Yeah.
But I was working on something that, you said it, I could do it well.
Yeah.
I could do my job well.
Yeah.
But I would walk out of the building downtown Houston and feel exhausted.
Yeah.
And not understand why.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether Tracy can put up the 70-30 tool I've just put on the back there, but that was exactly it. That kind of what you'll find with nurturer connectors is that actually you will do whatever you think people need, often to your own detriment. And if you get out of balance, it's the guardian detail in the rational, logical analysis of spreadsheets and data that because you can do it, people give you more of it. And because the team needs it, you feel responsible for it. But in the end, that's the place where if I'm leading you, JD, I'm going to make sure that you don't get stuck. People and detail, we can do all day. That's in the 70%. But data analysis and in many ways doing things on your own is not. So I think that's one of the, a fantastic way in. And I know people appreciate it. I know time's gone on. So JD, I want to ask, I suspect I know the answer, but I always say to people is JD, based on how you're wired now, if I was to say to you to think outside the box, which I know is not always the easiest thing for the nurturer, and I say, look, let's dream together a little bit. Let's assume that all of the resources, the financial resources of Giant around the world are available to you. All of the relational networks of everyone I know and everyone Jeremy knows, which is even more, and the whole of Giant world is deeply committed to helping whatever it is that you have a passion for become reality. What would we be partnering in if you had the absolute choice with money, no issue, relationships, no, connectors, no issue? Is there something that you would really love to do? Is there a business? Is there a nonprofit? What is it that JD Martin has in him that we're going to pull out in the next 5 minutes or so?
I was sharing with Tracy at the beginning of this before we got started here. I'm actually working right now to try to start a new company.
Yep. Come on, tell me.
And here's the driver behind it. And I think if you sat down with me and was like, look, we can do whatever we want to. I've been a little bit all over the place, kind of scatterbrained, which is not like a J at all, and all these different ideas of things that I could do. Yeah. But Steve, I'll tell you the primary driver. If you said, hey, resources are unlimited, let's do something cool.
Yep.
Here's what I love. I love helping people find a place where they're passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah.
So many people came to me when I committed, when I was ready to jump out of the boat and say, you know what, if I'm going to do Giant work, I've just got to go. There's no way I can do both. I can't be split off.
Yeah.
I'm committing. So many people, friends and colleagues came to me and was like, man, I wish I could do what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like I wish I could make that commitment and take the leap.
Yeah.
And we know from statistics that tell us 82 to 85% of people are miserable in their job. I don't want people to have to live like that.
No.
So I liberated myself right out of the organization and stepped out. Yeah. I would love to build companies, Steve, where we could put people in teams where they could really bring their best.
Yeah.
To see people thrive and flourish doing work that they enjoy doing with people they enjoy being around. Oh, man, that would be heaven for me.
So here's the thing, JD, is like when I listen, I always go, does that really align with the person that we've been talking to and the way that they're wired and the passions that they have? And I go, you've every nurturer, connector, guardian out there is probably going, amen. I wish I could do that too. And here's the thing which often happens is that when people hear maverick entrepreneurs like Jeremy and I, people go, well, of course you just give everything up and go and start something new. That's who you are. That's what you do. You make it look easy. When they hear the nurturer, connector, guardian talk about how they left their 18-year career in the gas industry and and because they were compelled to want to do something bigger than that fitted them, and then you did it. It doesn't actually matter, JD, how big what you've just described is. Actually, you will probably liberate more people who are listening to this and others who know to go, life's a bit short. Why don't you actually at some point go, what would I most love to do with it? So for you to be part of the thought of being able to go into organizations to help build healthy teams, to help liberate people to be the people they were made to be, so everyone is heard, valued, and appreciated, so that productivity happens, and for you to be a central part of the team with them. That's what giants tend to do. We tend to come alongside teams, and you get to stay there and be with them and help them grow what they do over time, and they move from clients to friends. As you move from transaction to relationship, you will have probably more fun doing that than is legal. My only question is always to go, because you could do that, and I could see you doing that for the rest of your life. But being a pioneer, I'm just going to stretch it a little bit and go, what I would always challenge you to do is to go, who are the 3 people who over time you can actually apprentice to do what you do, so that you multiply the capacity of how many teams, organizations you can do that for. You're always going to be part of the giant family. That's awesome. But I always say is you get your economic engine up and running. Who are those that perhaps you could invite to be with you as you do the thing you do? So I'm not asking you to change the world and build a global company, because I don't think that necessarily will be a blessing to you. But I am always going to give the stretch challenge, which is to go, what would it look like to not just do what you do, but what would it look like to equip others, perhaps who are like you, who have the same heart, the same passion, even in a small, so that when I talk to you in a couple of years' time, you go, Steve, I'm doing this, which I believe we will be. But hey, by the way, I took the apprenticeship challenge. I've got 2 or 3 people, other guides who work with me now, and I'm helping them do the thing that I love doing. So that would be my only little entrepreneurial challenge, JD. You may already be doing it. So come on, how does that sound to my little nurturer connector?
It sounds good. I think my biggest challenge would be picking out the 3, because you know what my nurturer says. Who are we leaving out?
Yeah. Well,
if we pick one, somebody's going to feel left out, and I'm going to hurt someone's feelings.
But you're gonna notice them if you actually, in some ways, actually keep an eye out. You'll find that there will be people who you go, I think I'm going to invite you to walk with me. I always say to people, you just try them on for size for a bit. Always date before you get married. It's a very wise thought. But the idea of going, you are going to be a liberating leader to so many people. You probably will need someone like me to help you price what you do accordingly as well, because you'll have a tendency to give it all away, because how could I possibly charge anyone for helping people do relationships? So that might be another one that is worth putting into the equation for the future. But JD, I love your story. I love the man that you are. I love the fact that actually you've been brave enough to break through those inhibitions, prohibitions, as we say, to actually take a leap of faith and go, I'm going to do this. And remember, 73% of the world speak nurture or guardian as their first voice. They are much more likely to trust you than they are a character like me. So don't ever underestimate the power of your voice. And that's something which I just go, as always, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for sharing. Is there anything final you'd like to say, JD, or any last question you might have before we sign off today?
No, thank you for the opportunity, Steve. I just say this for you nurturers and guardians, and it's to Steve's point right there. And listen, my kids are coming up. I've got one who loves to play softball, and she's so quiet. people need to hear what you have to say. That's you nurturers out there. You have valuable input and opinions. You just got to speak up and share it. Our tendency is to sit there quiet and wait until we're asked.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can't do that.
There you go. They'll hear it from you, JD, far more than me. So there's find some more resources on the Giant platform if you want to. All it leaves for me is the next Personality Yoda is actually June the 11th. We've got a holiday over here in the UK. And we've got a gentleman called Mark Tilsher who's working with the US military. So Mark is a creative pioneer. So a completely different voice to JD today. But JD, thank you for being our guest today. Thank you to all of you for listening. And again, a lot of you writing to me on LinkedIn, asking questions. Please use Giant as much as you can to be a liberating leader in your world. And great to be with you again today. Look forward to seeing you on the 11th.